Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Matty.
And I'm your co-host Jake, and today's episode is the idea of living forever. So this is interesting. I don't know about you. As a kid, when I first found out that humans die, it was probably one of the biggest crises I ever had.
Yeah, there's always the family pet or something that you find out about, isn't it? It's just...
Yeah. He's like, what? I'm not going to be around forever? Things actually come to an end? So for me, this kind of really freaked me out as a child, and I always kind of just forgot about it, put it in the back of my mind, and would watch a lot of sci-fi and read a lot of sci-fi with the hopes that, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. Someone will figure it out.
Mhm.
But
yeah.
it's interesting because, as we're going to be talking about in this episode, there are a few ways that we could potentially do it, but there is also quite a lot of science suggesting that maybe there actually might be a limit too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's quite interesting. But essentially, the two areas that I've done most of my research on today is cryogenics and the idea of either like uploading your mind to a computer or like digitizing yourself. Yeah. And I thought a good way to start it is there is a song by Grimes called We Appreciate Power. And the chorus is, and if you long to never die, baby, plug in, upload your mind. Come on, you're not even alive if you're not backed up on the drive. And I thought, that's quite some good lyrics. That's quite a funny way to approach it. But yeah, so we're going to kick it off with the idea that humans, I think, from the beginning of time, have wanted to live forever or have wrestled with the idea of living forever. And it's evident across many different kind of reaches. You've got religion, and then you've got like cults, you've got the cosmetic industry with like makeup and anti-aging, and then you've got big tech firms that are really trying to digitalize their brains, and then you've got the occasional questionable food blog that says if you eat these foods and you do exercise, your chances of it might be increased.
Yeah, but I think humans are obsessed with at least living longer, and I think sort of living forever is sort of like the natural next step of that, isn't it? So
yeah,
like you say, people have been thinking about this for millennia.
So I didn't actually know this, but apparently the first actual bit of literature where a human was writing down the idea of living forever is from the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it is a stone tablet from 2100 BC. And it's basically a king depicting the idea of swimming to the bottom of this ocean, battling this snake, and drinking the immortal potion. But he finishes his writing by losing to the snake and having a cry and giving up, which I feel like is most of humanity when they come to tackle this idea.
Yeah, I think that's definitely this year in a nutshell.
just giving up and letting it go to the end. But yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but from a scientific debate, it's essentially not really possible because damage to your cells is inevitable, and throughout time, they're only ever going to get worse until we figure out how to do it. And when you look at the rest of the nature around us, it's kind of the same too. Like nothing really lasts forever. I know when we look at the universe, there's still the debate whether it's like infinite or if it's finite, or if it will last forever or if it won't last forever.
Yeah. Sorry to sidetrack you and sort of jump in before you get onto like your cryogenics and stuff. But one area that I was researching was actually on sort of organisms that can sort of like heal themselves.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what they were now, but basically at the end of your strands of DNA, it's called telase, something like that.
Okay.
I'm sure comments will correct me on that. But at the end of like your DNA, there's these caps that sort of say where your DNA starts and begins. So when like those replicating, they can sort of do it at the right points, kind of thing. And there are organisms that are actually able to like repair those and lengthen them again. They sort of each time you replicate, they sort of wear down. That's like you say about the cell damage. It's just inevitable. But it does seem there's organisms that are able to not live forever and sort of be immortal, but can extend their life by actually changing their DNA properties and in that way. And I know scientists actually, I know you were sort of on like the tech side of it, but just sort of like the biology of it, they are looking at whether we can replicate some of that because, you know, like you said, even if we can get rid of most disease that kills people, there's still the just our cells become old and become less efficient and stuff. So
is that sort of like that, like the flatworm kind of thing?
Yeah, it was some sort of worm or some amoeba thing. It was, but yeah, it does seem there is some possible way to do this, which is I'm sure going to be interesting over the next sort of couple of years as they look into it more.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I know this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but the actual idea of like Spider-Man and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe came from this idea with like cross genetics with animals. Because I think one of the main villains from that, he I think it's like a scientist who gets cancer and he tries to cross his genetics with a lizard so he can like regrow cells or regrow his limbs. And obviously it goes wrong, and then that's how you get the birth of like the Lizard Man, and then you have Spider-Man and all this kind of stuff. But it's interesting because I can imagine as well from like a military standpoint that might be something that humans would want to fiddle with in the future too. Do you know what I mean? Because like being able to like, I can imagine anyway, if you could, instead of like having to create a robotic arm, it would be a lot better for the host if they could like regrow their arm from their own genetics. So it's like not like, you know how it would be easy to bond. You know how sometimes when you get like an organ transplant, it doesn't sit well in the body. I can imagine like 300 years in the future, we have like the ability to like regrow organs from our own DNA kind of thing. And I can imagine at that point, it'd be kind of a similar thing where as you start to age, your skin cells and everything would like shed and you'd generate new ones. But obviously that's super out there.
The genetic stuff is very, it's not something that I really follow that closely, but some of the stuff they do is just, it's sci-fi and it's so weird. The one I saw was about, they'd given a cat, they'd changed its genetic makeup with some other animal to make the cat resistant to HIV, which is great. You know, they managed to do that, I think, with some sort of bacterial genome. But then I think just for fun and just like to see if they could do it, they made it glow in the dark by combining it. They I think some genome from some sea creature like a squid or a cuttlefish or something like that. And they made this cat glow in the dark, and like we're already at this point where, you know, it's even more evident in crops and stuff where we combine sort of genomes and genetically modified crops. We do this all the time. We sort of make things more resilient to stuff and all this sort of thing. So,
you know what? I think you saying that actually is just made something pop off in my head. I think, and I might be wrong, but I think I remember reading something a couple of years ago that some scientists were working on actually doing it with a spider and a flatworm, and they had some like positive results. Like they cut the spider's leg off and it actually grew back.
Yeah. The other one I saw was they wanted to combine, I think they did it. They combined a silkworm with a goat and made the goat milk silk. Like
what? That's so
like
crazy.
You would milk the goat, and there was like silk. As I understand it, is basically just a protein, and milk is a protein and sugars as well. So they just made, instead of making the proteins that are in goat milk, they got it to make silk protein. So when you milked it, you had this like pure like silk fibers.
That's insane. It's insane.
And like I know you were like joking about the like lizard arm and stuff, but like it probably isn't that far away that we could do some really weird stuff.
Yeah. And like And like, especially with like space travel and stuff too, and like going to other planets, like I can imagine that somebody's definitely thinking about this. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, if even like the quite not as like obvious stuff, but if we were just able to make humans more resistant to radiation, that would be a huge benefit because you could then save a load of weight on
Yeah.
radiation shielding and stuff. There's loads of ways that it could go, and I think, to be honest, more than anything that's holding it back is like the morals and ethics of it. People don't like the idea of genetically modifying humans. So
I'm surprised, and they might have already done this too, but I'm surprised like there hasn't been something to do with like cold-blooded animals, especially like with the military. Because you'd think like having a soldier that is cold-blooded would be a pretty good asset.
Yeah, there's definitely like really crazy things that you can see them doing with this or trying to do with this.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think, to be honest, probably the military is not a bad shout for where it would first come from, because of, civilians are probably more concerned about the ethics and morals of it than sort of military technologies. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, sorry to sidetrack you.
No, it's cool. It's cool. It's very interesting because it just blurs the lines in the future. Because then it's like you're saying, isn't it? It's like there's like two sides to it with like the whole ethics. Because there's the one approach where it's like you should kind of leave evolution to do its own thing, but then there's like the other side to the extreme where it's like, well, if we're smart enough to do it, look at all these animals that we could cross genetics with to make us better. There's like a huge playground of different like things from evolutionary standpoints that could help boost our own kind of survival.
Yeah.
But I found this and I actually thought it was really interesting. So they said here that there's like a common misconception between living forever and what that actually means. And it doesn't actually mean pausing the age process. They're saying here that if you increase the rate in which our lives are lengthened, a human lifespan can be lengthened at a constant rate 2 years per decade for the last 200 years. And if we speed that up to the future, we basically just need longevity to escape velocity, and then we become immortal. And I thought that was quite interesting because you could totally see that happening with even like the tech boom, like recently. Because like if you spoke to a human, say 100 or 200 years ago, they wouldn't believe you that humans would live to 100 years. And it's interesting.
Yeah. I think my personal sort of view on it is that there is some limiting factor. Like that, people always say that, the first person to live to 200 has already been born. And I'm like, that's a very, very big statement. And I really don't know, to be honest. Like, I feel like potentially we could push it further, but humans as we are now, without some of the technologies you spoke about, like cryogenics and or like biological enhancements, it just feels like we just get old. and I think maybe the thing for me is that I don't know of many people over the age of 100 that are having a fantastically great time of things. Like, once you get that old, you're just sort of a bit slow and sluggish, and sort of degenerative diseases like dementia and things. And it's just like,
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. And like, doesn't your brain start to deteriorate at like around 27?
Yeah, I think your late 20s is like your brain capacity peak. So
yeah, so it's one of those things because like, would you want to live forever if you're aging but like your mind doesn't, for instance, or vice versa? Like if we figure out how to keep our bodies young but our minds age, I wouldn't really enjoy that either. Imagine having like this young body but everybody's going crazy in their own minds because they've been around for too long. So it's interesting, but they're basically saying here from this study that to boost the lifespan of people living in countries that are already pretty wealthy, we need to take a closer look at countries that have the highest life expectancy in the coming years. And there was a study published earlier this year, and what life expectancy might look like in 2030 in 35 industrialized countries using an amalgamation of 21 different forecasting models. And South Korea actually tops the charts with women living to an average of beyond 90, whilst France, Japan, Switzerland, and Australia are not that far behind. But most of the countries at the top of the chart have high quality healthcare provisions, low infant deaths, low smoking and traffic injury rates, and fewer people overweight or obese. The US, meanwhile, is projected to see the only modest rise due to a lack of healthcare access and high rates of obesity, child mortality, and homicides. It says here that the study results are interesting, not only because they're the best possible guess at a future, but because they clearly show how social policies make a massive difference to how people live. And there's obviously like the unknowns. So like in the 80s, there was the AIDS epidemic, and you have pandemics like now. Nobody saw this coming, and you can't stop it from happening. But this idea of like the ban on smoking, the fighting obesity, the introduction of autonomous cars to help with like roadside accidents, all of these things increase lifespan, but we're still not knocking on the door of like immortality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this is, to me, like I just said, it doesn't seem like we're actually extending our lives. It's more that there is some limit, and like throughout human history, our progress towards that limit has just been very stunted because of like the things like healthcare and stuff.
Yeah.
So like it's like a progress bar, and like let's say that the absolute limit is 150 or something, and like 200 years ago we were only able to get to like 40 or 50, and then like we've just gradually been increasing that, but it's not really extending our lives. It's just more fully sort of getting that life. If that makes sense.
Yeah. We're just kind of like making it safer, kind of thing.
Yeah, like
yeah.
So I never really understand with these statistics of like life expectancy. Is that literally everyone? Like, what is the average age that everyone dies at? Because like within that, you have the things of like people who have died from a lack of sort of healthcare, people who have died from accidents and stuff, or been murdered and things. And it seems to me that if you take all of those out, it's gradually been creeping up, but that's not because we're extending things. It's just because we're more like achieving our potential. Like 200 years ago, diets were pretty rubbish, and people used to work stupid hours like in agriculture and stuff. It's like I don't really see this as extending our life. We're just more like
we're just increasing the chances of living a full life.
A full life. That's it.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with you. And actually, there's another study that was published here that literally is kind of along those lines. So there was another study by Nature in 2016 that concluded the upper limits of the human age is stuck at about 115 years old. And they say by analyzing global demographic data, we show that improvements in survival with age tend to decline after the age 100, and that age and death of the world's oldest person has not increased since the 1990s.
No.
So that kind of falls more back into that idea that like we might have hit a limit, but now we're just kind of getting everybody to wake up and realize that if you do these things, you can get there too.
Exactly. There's a limit, and just more people are getting close to that limit because they are living healthily and not dying through horrible Victorian industrial accidents.
100%. I'd agree with you on that. And I think like these kind of ideas with like eating healthy and stuff, like, yes, they're good, but I think they do also create like a lot of clickbait and a lot of like propaganda too, because you can also, on the other side of the coin, literally live the world's healthiest life and just be unlucky.
Oh yeah, like you could be, I know people personally who have like perfectly fit, having a great life. You'd say they are model humans, and at the age of 40 they have a stroke or something, and then
totally.
Everyone has their time. But I think not to go off on one again, not to go off on one, but nutritional science to me is just like the biggest clickbait farm that there is in like the sciences. I know with like physics, people like to put out the articles of water on Mars and is there life on the moon and stuff. Like the media love it, but nutritional sciences, just every single week, it's like chocolate can help with your cholesterol, and then the next week it's chocolate increases cholesterol, and drinking a glass of wine a day is good.
There's always one about bacon as well. Whenever I've just stopped looking now. I'm going to eat bacon until I die, and that's that.
Yeah, it's always bacon, wine, olive oil, and chocolate, and then there's usually a superfood of the week.
Yeah, no, totally. I'd agree with you on that one. But yeah, so let's jump into the two that could potentially do it. Now, the first one, cryogenics, it's not really allowing you to live forever, but it's essentially freezing you until somebody figures out how you can live forever, which isn't bad if you've got a load of money. I mean, if I was a billionaire and I hadn't still put much, because we'll talk about where we both sit on this fence towards the end. But I can imagine if you're very rich and you fear death, or you're an atheist or whatever you are, I can imagine that cryogenics probably seems like quite a viable option, because you're just putting your hand, like you're putting yourself in the hands of somebody else, and it's that classic approach, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, I'll just freeze myself and someone else will figure it out. They can thaw me when they've got that technology, and I'll be living in the year 3000 like Futurama. So cryogenics, anyway, it was first proposed in the 1960s, and it was in a book called The Prospect of Immortality by Robert Ettinger. And it basically involves freezing the body either soon after death or upon death at about minus 196. And the idea is once the medicine has been invented to cure your disease, or once somebody's figured out how to digitalize your consciousness, or once somebody's figured out how to thaw you, you will be reanimated. But I find it quite weird, because I was doing some research on this, and there's actually quite a few companies in America doing this.
Yeah.
And I was watching a YouTube video, and they were walking around this warehouse with these giant like cylinder tanks. And this person was like, yeah, so-and-so family is in there, and so-and-so family is in there. And like, some families take this really seriously. Like, there are grandparents, parents, like their children, their grandchildren in it. And they've all bought into this idea that they're all going to be brought back one day. And like, maybe they might, and they might have the final laugh, because you never know. Their guess is as good as ours. But I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't, particularly when it's after death, you're sort of, even if you like went for cryogenics when you were like really old, you're not just betting on someone being able to like cure your disease or like reanimate you at some point. You're betting on them being able to reverse the aging process, unless you plan on living as pretty much a dead man for the rest of your life. Like,
because this was going to be the next point. Like, ideally, if you were going to do it, you'd want to like do it now, right? Like in your 20s, you'd want to be frozen in your 20s, and so you can be reanimated whenever at that age. But at the same time, like, you're taking a huge gamble, like kind of like finishing your life. Say if we did it now, like in your mid 20s, like, they might never figure that out, and you've just like kind of killed yourself, but not in a way. I don't know. I think there's some definitely unanswered questions. I think it makes sense if you've got, say, if you're like in your 30s or 40s and you've got like a really bad disease, and you've got the money to do it with the hopes that maybe one day they can bring you back and sort out that disease. But you're also going to be waking up in a world where everybody you know and love is gone. So like, do you really want to live that life anyway?
Yeah, there's loads of questions about it, and I find it really weird that people are actually doing this, because, I'd say I'm quite sort of techie and into the future and stuff, and I sort of look at this and I'm like, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah. And like, what happens if there is no future? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to be cynical, but like, we don't seem to be getting our act together with like global warming and stuff. Could you imagine like spending all that money, like freezing yourself and then waking up in a world that's worse than the one you went down in?
Yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? And I don't. I thought about it before, and you just sort of get into this leap of, if you had the money, then it's sort of a gamble that you might as well make, because you've got nothing to. If you're older, say you've got nothing to lose, like
Yeah.
by doing it. But at the same time, it just seems like a stupidly slim odds that like anything good is going to come of this. To be honest,
Yeah. And something else that I was thinking about as well, which wouldn't have crossed my mind if we weren't living in 2020 and there was a global pandemic, but you're surely, like, even like how we discussed last week with like interplanetary contamination and this idea of building resistance to like bugs and diseases and the flus and stuff, like you're essentially like freezing yourself and letting the rest of life carry on evolving. Do you stand much of a chance when you get like reanimated in that world? Are you just going to get sick straight away and die? Because like I can imagine the diseases aren't going to like stop and be like, oh, well, you know, we'll just wait 200 years so we're still equal and you still got all your flu jabs and stuff. Like I can imagine a lot will change. There'll be a lot of new diseases. Things will evolve. Things will get much worse or much better, or something new will crop up in its place. And like, I can't imagine you'd be very like well fitted for the world either.
Yeah, even with like just the technology and stuff of like trying to fit into the world. I know like a lot of people like go to prison and stuff when they come out after 20, 30 years have a real like hard time of fitting back into society, because even in just like decades things change massively. And yeah, it's a big gamble of you're basically just putting your life on hold if you view it in that way, or you're dying and being reborn. So
yeah, and I think as well there's kind of like this other thing too. Like this is like, I don't know, this might just be me now, but this whole idea of you almost kind of need like the old to be replaced by the new at some point, otherwise there is no like progress. And it's kind of scary if you think about it, like how some of these like rich people can kind of like do that, because it essentially means that like if everybody does it one day, then will there ever be any change? Because people from a certain time will freeze themselves, will reanimate themselves, and then the way like that we live our lives in like social aspects, politics aspects, like world views, they won't go away and new ones won't replace it. Do you know what I mean? We'll still have some of these like old views kind of thing. And I can imagine that is quite dangerous to like civilization, because if you've got, because can you imagine like, say for instance, if cryogenics was around in the 1600s and we were reanimating all these people now, that probably wouldn't be very good if there were more people from the 1600s than there were now, because it would mean that we'd probably be living in a world that would be more in the views or the opinions of the 1600s than now. And that would probably put a halt on a lot of things, especially like with like the Crusades and everything like that, and religion and the universe and stuff. And I just think that's probably something that doesn't really get thought about that much, because we'd essentially, because it's quite dangerous to be nostalgic. And I feel like if it got to a point where it was only the rich that were able to do this, then it kind of, I'm not saying that all of the rich are corrupt, but it's this idea that maybe you're kind of like sending corrupt people into the future. And if they've got influence, then that could be quite bad.
Yeah, I think there's some big like societal problems with this, and to be honest, the American companies that are doing it at the moment, not to, if anyone's like listening who's a family member is in one of these cryogenic stories, it feels a bit gimmicky and a bit sort of, I don't know whether these people actually think that this is going to work out, or they're just like, oh, I might as well do it. like a bit of fun kind of thing. But yeah, I don't really know. And like the society problems, they're huge, and like even when people are like in these things, what rights do they have? You know, if a company went bust, would they just get turned off and that'll be it? Or
Yeah, like whose problem are they if like the company goes bust? Yeah, that's a very, very good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that one. And like, are there backup plans? Or another idea, what happens if that family that's in there, their money dries up?
Yeah,
and they don't figure it out. Do they just turn you off? Is that like part of the clause, or?
yeah. Well, I guess like there's a big question of like, are these people who have died and have been put in cryogenics, are they actually people while they're in there? If there was a power cut, say, and like the machines went off and they thawed out and that was it, would like the company be liable for like negligence? Because
Yeah.
have you killed them, or were they just, you know, almost like a stuffed animal kind of thing that, you know, has been damaged in some way? Like, there's lots of questions about like what these people are and what to do with them in a lot of situations.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And actually, just thinking again about the whole disease aspect of it, like, do you want to send diseases into the future? Because, like, even if we develop a cure, say after like 1,000 years, people might not be getting that jab anymore because we've eradicated it, and then all of a sudden you go and stick someone back in that society with chickenpox or some like HIV, for instance, and then boom, it just takes one person to get it again. It's
funny you say this, because I saw a thing recently. They're quite in Siberia or in like the top of Scandinavia, that sort of area. There's areas where you're not allowed to dig up because there's smallpox people who died of smallpox like buried up there, and they're quite concerned that with global warming, the permafrost is going to thaw out, and this smallpox that has been like kept basically in cryogenics in permafrost for 100 or 200 years, whatever. It's going to thaw out and people are going to find it.
Oh, God. I think I've seen something actually about that, because there's a few like diseases, aren't there, that are like frozen, that they're really worried that if they like thaw out, they could like result in it. Isn't like the Black Plague in it as well?
Yeah, the Black Plague's a weird one, because I saw it still technically exists, but it's an odd one. But yeah, like the smallpox one, I know there's a video by Tom Scott on it about this town in, I think, Norway, where it's illegal to die, and it's like it's from way back in the smallpox days, where the mayor, like, people were dying of smallpox, and because of the permafrost and the frozen ground, you can't bury people, and like they had like a real big problem of like bodies with smallpox like not getting buried properly in the permafrost. And the mayor just decided that he was going to pass a law to make it illegal to die in the town. And, like it's still in effect.
That's funny. That's crazy. That's actually crazy. But yeah, little tangent there. But essentially, the main problem is the brain. Because even with the freezing process in the brain, I watched this video of how they actually do it, and I don't know about you, but I get quite weak when it comes to like blood and operations and stuff. I'm not the best with it. If I fall over, I will have to sit down, otherwise you'll see me go. But they were basically saying how when these people do this, they have to they go for like a consultation and stuff. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's really weird. I can't remember the name of the company, but you like go for a consultation, you get it all set up so that when you die, somebody it's really fast. It's within like 2 hours of your death kind of thing. Somebody comes and gets you, takes you back to this place. They remove the blood from your body and they like fill you up with like this plasm or something. And then they freeze you. And they keep the blood separate, ready to be able to put back into you one day. And they put this like thing into your body that basically acts as like a coating for all of your organs and arteries so they don't expand and explode.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, like water expands when it freezes, like the human brain in particular is like 80% water.
Yeah.
It's like surely your brain just sort of just like turns to mush.
Yeah.
Ice crystals just like popping stuff. And
But they were talking about it, and it was really freaking me out because I was just like, oh, can you imagine being drained? obviously you're out of it. You don't know what's going on. But just like this idea of being drained and being filled up with something that isn't like your blood, and then being frozen next to like a cylinder of your blood, with the idea that one day they'll be able to reverse that process, put the blood back in you, and you'll just wake up and everything will be okay. And I was watching this and I was like, oh my God, like, how do people even go through with that? Like, even in the consultation, it would really, really freak me out. And like, even for like your family members, like, that's not a nice thought if you're like, your nan's getting drained and then like pumped full of this plasm, and then that's that. It's just really freaky.
Yeah, I think about it now, and I've never really thought about how does this actually work? Because like, even like at the basic level, a human cell is just a sack of basically water with some stuff in it. How do the cells not just explode? Because like,
do you reckon,
think about, like,
do you think they like freeze dry you or like dehydrate you after they've like drained you?
That is just as bad for, like, I'm thinking, like, I've seen videos where you put cells of, maybe not humans, but like even just like plant cells and stuff, and you put it in like salt water, and it will like just dry out or explode as it like takes on and loses water. Like, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
If you freeze someone, surely every cell in their body is going to pop.
Yeah, because even if you're like draining them, you're totally right. Like, you're 70% water, it's still not going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. I know that the cryogenics, they do it very quickly, and it's not like a freezer. It's very like flash freezing sort of thing. But I don't see how you can freeze some without them just popping.
No, that's actually a very good point.
I never really thought about it, but I'll have to look into that.
Well, here, the argument for it is, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, this is what I said. Like, it's a gamble of. I think this is. Have you ever heard of Pascal's wager?
No.
It's sort of a bit of a tangent again, but Pascal's wager is originally like to do with belief in God, in that it's probably quite improbable that God exists.
Yeah.
Like, even if you say it's like almost infinitely small chance, but the payoff is infinitely big, and you've got nothing to lose by doing it.
Yeah.
You know, if you believe in God, then no matter how small of a chance it is, there's a chance you like will go to heaven and stuff.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe in God, then there's a chance that you'll go to hell, sort of thing. So you might as well
just
take the small, take the short chance and believe. And this is sort of similar. Is that if you've got the money and like it's not an issue, then you might as well take a gamble and just see, sort of thing. So,
yeah, just see if it happens, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually I'd never actually really thought about it. I think it's an interesting point because I honestly don't know. I think is it human centric to have the belief that we're going to figure it out? Because I am a little bit of a futurist, and I often do believe that we're going to do everything that you see in these sci-fi films one day, but will we? And actually, like, can you imagine even being reanimated in a crisis? Like, imagine if they figure it out, you get reanimated, and the first thing that happens when you wake up is they're like, the sun's just exploded. Mm-hmm. This is it, kind of thing. And you're just like, what? They're like, yeah, we figured it out, but you're doomed.
This is the thing, like, you talk about living forever. It's not only a human problem. Eventually, the solar system is going to end, and probably at some point an asteroid will hit Earth. And it's not just us living forever, it's Earth surviving forever. So
yeah, and I think, well, this is it. This is where it starts to get a little bit depressing for me, because it's like you need so many different things to be able to do this. Like, it's not just about overcoming like the idea of living forever. Like, even if we figure out a way to become immortal, the next thing is figuring out how we become multiplanetary. then the next thing, because like even if we become, have you seen on Netflix Alien Worlds?
No.
Right.
I feel like every week you say, "Have you seen this?" And
Right.
I'm always like, "No, I'm not."
Matty, this is another thing you need to watch, and anybody listening, you need to watch this. It's insane. So they basically there's like these 3 scientists, and they basically like look at life on Earth and its origins, and then they kind of like hypothesize what life might look elsewhere on Earth. Not intelligent life, but just the idea of, say, like there's one planet in this hypothetical scenario called Eden, and it's basically twice the size of Earth. And because it's twice the size of Earth, gravity's twice as big. So nothing can actually get off the ground. So how would life evolve if nothing can actually get off the ground? And it's really interesting. Like it's all like CGI, and like some of the animals that they show you are absolutely crazy. Like there's this like one animal that doesn't actually have any like brain or anything, but it just its skin acts as almost kind of like a acid, and it just rolls along the floor, just like rolling over all of the insects and absorbing them and consuming them, kind of thing. But
basically a jellyfish.
Yeah, but there's this towards the end of it. It's like spoiler alert. There's one like planet, and it has quite an intelligent like race on there, and effectively their brains in jars, okay, or in boxes, and they've got to the point where robots run the planet for them, and they all live as in brains in jars as this hive mind, and they just experience consciousness together. And it's really interesting because their sun turns into a red giant and their planet's going to be engulfed. So what they do is they send a load of probes to the next planet to get it ready for them to terraform it. Mm-hmm. And when they're terraforming it and they get there, they realize that even if you can live forever, like even if life figures it out, you will always be running, because the sun just keeps getting bigger and engulfing the next planet and the next planet until it explodes, and then their solar system's gone. And they talk about this idea, and it's interesting to think about, because it's like, yeah, even if you become multiplanetary, the next thing is to become like a multi-star system, because you've got to get away from our sun. Otherwise, you've only got, what is it, like 4 billion years?
I can't remember. I never know these numbers.
But like, even that then itself, do you know what I mean? So it just feels like there is so much to overcome. So not even do you have to like figure out how do you become immortal. You've got to figure out how we get to the next planet. Then how do we terraform that next planet so that life can be comfortable? Then you've got to figure out how we get to the next star system. And as we've seen with like Alpha Centauri and stuff, the distances are like incredible. And it just seems like the odds are stacked so highly against life, it's not going to happen, but life also kind of always finds a way. Mm-hmm. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do think about it sometimes that there does seem to be this sort of force in the universe that tries to deny life, and maybe this is why we just don't see it anywhere. It's just so improbable that it can survive.
Yeah,
because everything just seems to be stacked against us, and I think this idea of sort of like living forever is in this sort of bigger picture of not just living forever, but being able to survive forever.
Yeah, no, totally. But I think we should move on from cryogenics and move on to the idea of uploading your mind, because I think this is probably a more likely way of doing it. It might not necessarily be the right idea or the best way of doing it, but I feel like it's probably got the best chances. I don't know. Mm-hmm. What's your kind of viewpoint on uploading your mind? Do you think we'll ever figure it out? Or do you think, because like go on.
I think we will figure it out. I think we will do it. It's just I don't know if it would be us.
Yeah, like, this is how I feel about
it. I feel like we are. I think we're quite close to being able to like simulate a human brain in computer land. And I guess if you're simulating a human brain, then why couldn't we just simulate a specific human brain, which is there's sort of different levels to this, and I guess is that you or not is another question. But there's this really big question of like, I really don't want to get onto the subject of can computers be conscious and stuff again. If you even like perfectly manage to simulate yourself and upload yourself, is it actually you, and is it a real thing? Is it living? I don't really know.
Yeah, this is kind of how I feel about it, because I saw this guy on YouTube. I think it was like last year. I don't know if you've seen him, but he's basically recording his life from multiple angles. He's got a GoPro on his head. He's got multiple cameras all over his house, and then he's put GoPros on his route to walk and everything. So you basically, wherever he is, he's always on a camera, with this idea that when he dies, all of this data will be given to someone and they will be able to like reproduce him almost identically, like the way that he thinks, his mannerisms, the way that he acts, everything. But it won't actually be him, but it'll be like a digital copy of him. Yeah. And this is kind of like how I feel about like uploading consciousness. Like, I feel like we'll do it, but like, will it be you? Like, I feel like one day I will die. And if that was an option and they did say like upload my brain to a hard drive and turn me into some like crazy AI that runs the bus schedule in England or something, I don't know. But like, even though it's me, and if you got like a family member to talk to it, they'd be like, oh my God, it's Jake. But it wouldn't actually be me. It's not my being. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It's a weird one, because I feel like we could get pretty good at making a solid copy, but you're not like duplicating your consciousness. You're not going to be being in two places at once. Do you know what I mean? You're only going to be, you can only really experience I am kind of thing because you're experiencing it. And I don't feel like you could experience it from two different vantage points.
Yeah, this is like the thing. It's always talked about with like Star Trek and the, I've not seen Star Trek, but is it the what's it called?
I have no idea, dude. I'm not a Trekkie fan.
Oh, okay. The machine that can like beam you across the universe and
the tractum thing. Yeah, I know what you're talking
that's
about.
the one. Yeah. This is like basically that question of like, if you step into it and you appear somewhere else, have you been teleported, or has the machine killed you and reassembled you somewhere? And and it's the same sort of problem, isn't it? It's that if you think about it, okay, if I go into a machine and upload my consciousness and I'm still alive, then that surely can't be me. Like, that can't be me because I'm here. You've made a copy of it. Well, what if the processing is exactly the same, but I just happen to die while it's doing it? Is that it's no more me, but suddenly I no longer exist, and
that one
this simulated version of me does. So it's a weird one, and I just don't feel like it's a person.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, and I think as well, like, yeah, that's a very good point, because if you asked the consciousness that's been uploaded to the computer, say, it probably will think it is you, but it's not you because you're there too. Do you know what I mean? Like that's a gray area too. Like, what happens if we do it and so you upload your mind to a computer and you make an exact copy. Now you're both arguing that you're you, but like, which one is actually you?
Yeah.
And that's quite scary.
Yeah, I honestly don't know how you answer it, and I think at some point we are going to have to answer this question, and I suspect we will come down on the side of these things aren't actually people; they're just very complex simulations of almost like video games that you can interact with. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. Talking about video games, actually, this is something that happens in Cyberpunk, because I've been playing that the last couple of days, and that really freaked me out, because the whole like idea of it is something basically goes wrong and there are two consciousnesses stuck in the same head, and they're both wrestling with each other, but they both come to the realization that one will fall into a pit of darkness forever and the other one will take over the host, and they're both arguing over who it should be. And it's quite a scary idea.
I really hate this.
It's quite deep. But looking back on this quickly, so there was so let me just find this, because I had I had some really cool notes about this. Yeah, here you go. So they were basically looking at how like neurons and everything work, and there's this thing called the Human Conundrum Project. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
And they're basically making a start and using AI to help. And it's this idea that they've got 21 million neurons, and I think it's 1 trillion synapses, but it's artificial, and they're trying to create a computational human brain, and they're basically experimenting on it to see if it can like remember things.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think I have this thing. The one that I knew of was they were doing this with a rat brain. So I think this is probably something that I've been out of the loop for a little while, and they've sort of advanced it since then. But I know what you're talking about now. This idea of like not just simulating like an abstracted brain, but simulating the actual connections of a brain.
Yeah. So here, I haven't got the rat, but they've done it with a worm here.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the 302 neurons that a worm has and the 7,500 synapses, it was only 12 gigs of data. And
Mm-hmm.
they were basically saying that you can download this in full, and they were installing it onto a robot. So they basically got this robot to have like the equivalent of a worm's brain. But they were saying that when it gets to like the human level, and you start getting like in the trillions and the billions, we almost don't have enough computing power to be able to connect it all.
Yeah, the human brain is a really weird thing. It's so powerful, but it's completely biological. I don't really understand
Yeah.
how anything like it could come into existence.
But you'll find this funny anyway. Essentially, they've been trying to do it, and they've managed to push it to a point, as I was saying, where they've got 21 million neurons and 1 trillion synapses, and even at that level, they've only managed to get it to remember certain lines from songs. It can't even like string a sentence together.
Yeah, it's just mind blowing, isn't it? Like,
So it just seems like, and this kind of like falls back into this whole like idea of, I know we've discussed it in the past and we're going to do it in the future with like simulation theory and stuff, but it just almost seems like there's too much naturally going on that you'd almost like collapse the universe by like trying to like simulate it again, or like have enough computing power to be able to create something like us.
Yeah, it biology is just so complex, and it's a genuine miracle that any of it even exists. But yeah, this idea of like being able to simulate our universe within the universe is surely not possible, because you would need more matter than
it's like energy
we have in the
conservation
universe.
stuff,
It's just and I don't really know what to make of this sort of stuff, whether it's like a bit like the cryogenics, if it's a bit of a sort of clickbaity fad sort of thing, whether people are actually taking this seriously. But yeah, like the team that's doing this sort of simulated brain, they certainly seem to think they could do something with it. But it's almost, not to go too much into the AI, but the whole reason we try to pursue AI and computing and stuff is because it can do stuff that humans can't.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a almost backwards process of like, oh, let's make a computer exactly like us so it's good at doing what we can do, when AI is maybe, like, we don't understand a lot of AI. A lot of, obviously someone has built it at some point, but we've got to a point now where a lot of AI is literally just a black box, and we chuck stuff into it and out comes results.
Yeah.
And it with like neural networks, and it sort of does its own thing. And trying to start from the ground level of making a human brain so that it can do things is almost like the backwards way of doing it, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think there's a quite a big like misconception when it comes to AI with like you were saying, like this idea. I think a lot of people do think that we're just trying to create like a sentient computer when really, like as you were saying, like AI is really good at being like super focused at certain tasks and can do them exponentially better than humans can.
Yeah.
And I think like you were saying, in the future, I think it will go more that way, and it does kind of almost seem backwards, but maybe it will also lead to breakthroughs with consciousness and stuff too. I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Maybe. Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I think we probably will see it in our lifetimes of this idea of a computer that is now at a human level. And do we decide it is a conscious thing or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is how we'll wrap this subject up. If you could live forever, Matty, would you?
It's just such a. If you could say, if you said, okay, do you want to live like I am now in my 20s forever, or for a very long time, then I'd probably say yes. But the moment you factor in things like aging and, is it just me that's living forever, or is everyone else I know living forever? And what does that mean for population and, et cetera, et cetera? I'd probably say no.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I think the idea of it is very pleasing, but I think once, like you're saying, once you start factoring in, does everybody else live forever? If so, then hey, that still sounds great, but then now we need to start thinking about population, food, energy. What does that mean for the universe? What happens if in like 1 billion years we've used up everything in the universe and now everybody's just hungry until the end of time? Do you know what I mean? And like it's and how living forever, like how are you living forever? Like, do you still need to eat? Can you still get hurt? Like you don't want to be like, say if like a comet smashes into the side of the planet, breaks up Earth, you don't want to be floating through space, forever freezing, forever burning, and forever choking, but you can't die.
Yeah.
And you just keep coming back to life every time you die, kind of like just before you die kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know. I'd like to live longer. I'd like to, like, if somebody came to me and they're like, do you want to live for 300 years or 500 years or 1,000 years? I might be inclined to go, yeah, why not? I'd like to see what the future looks like. But I think living forever is actually kind of scary. I think living forever scares me more than actually dying, because it could be really horrible. And like, if you go insane or you're the last human or something, like, what does that mean? Like, imagine being left in your own thoughts for eternity. It just, I don't know. It kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah.
Should we move on to some space news?
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to
so
kick things off?
I'll kick something off with a little bit of good news. So with the Artemis missions, it was announced on the 16th of December, but there will be a Canadian astronaut flying with the first crewed Artemis missions, which is pretty awesome. It was announced a couple of days ago, and it basically says that Canada's going to be providing the Canadarm3 robotic arm for the Lunar Gateway. And also with this, they're going to be having one of the astronauts on the first mission in 2023. And there's a nice little graphic if anybody listening wants to go and look at it. It looks really, really cool. I'm so excited for this Lunar Gateway.
Yeah, honestly, I can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. But yeah, it looks really, really interesting. And I think it's going to be interesting going forward, because Canada's always kind of been there, haven't they? The Canadian Space Agency with NASA. They've always had this pretty good partnership. I think it's good to see going forward. It's nice seeing these Artemis missions not just be America. It's nice to see the UK Space Agency getting involved, Canada getting involved, and other countries too. It's good because it did get quite a lot of not bad press, but I think a lot of people were looking down on it when NASA first announced like the Artemis Accords and the rules of who could mine where and what. Because I think a lot of people just felt it was like America going, you can't go there because it's ours kind of thing. And I don't really think that was the point. I think they were trying to create peace in space, but I could see why it would come across as a bit of a flex.
Yeah. I think, Canada's got quite a good history of this sort of stuff. They provided the Canadarm for the space shuttle, so they know what they're doing.
Yeah, it looks cool as well.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's the first little bit. Do you want me to move on to my second one, or?
I'll do one of my ones. So last week we discussed how JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, had returned samples from the asteroid Ryugu on their mission. Well, also last week we didn't include it in last week's episode because it was breaking as we were doing it. There's a few more details out now. China's, again, butcher the pronunciation, Chang'e 5 spacecraft has landed back from the moon. It's been gone about a month now, and has landed with moon rocks. So these are the first samples from the moon since the 70s. I think, nearly just over 40 years ago, our last moon samples, and they've now arrived back on Earth, and I believe they are sort of in the process of getting them out and starting to look over them. So
yeah, I did see yesterday. I don't know if you saw on Twitter, but it was quite funny. Did you see that fox trending? The cosmic fox that ran past it. That was quite funny. The only thing I was a bit confused about with this is why was there a flag planted next to it?
Well, everyone likes planting a flag. That's
because I was just confused because did it land in China?
So it landed in Inner Mongolia, which so it's I think it's disputed, but it's technically a part of China, called Inner Mongolia.
Cool. Yeah. I just thought that because I thought it landed in a different country and China had just put their flag next to it, and I was like, that's unusual, but fair enough. That makes more sense.
Inner Mongolia, which is part of China, supposedly. But they brought back 2 kilograms of rock, which is quite a bit more than like the Apollo missions did. I think they will be usually bringing back a few hundreds of grams typically. And it comes from this Ocean of Storms region, which is this massive lava plain, which previously we hadn't explored. So there's probably going to be quite a lot of scientific interest in these samples going forwards.
Are they? Do we know if they're sharing it with the world, or are they keeping it under wraps?
I honestly don't know. I've not seen anything about it in terms of where the samples are going. I've just seen they've got them and they're starting to look over them and get them out. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I do hope they, obviously for the sake of science, they share things, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll move on to my next bit. It's a little bit more hostile, but I thought it was interesting because we like to talk about space debris and satellites and stuff, and this was new and I hadn't seen it before, but essentially Space Force in America have been reporting that there's been a Russian missile test and it's exposed vulnerability to low orbiting satellites.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially on December the 15th, Russia conducted a ballistic missile test that has the ability to take out satellites in low Earth orbit.
Yeah, so this is basically an anti-satellite missile that they've tested.
Yeah.
China did one of, I remember I mentioned it a little while back, and caused a load of space debris.
Yeah.
With their tests, but yeah, it seems like Russia's also got anti-satellite missiles now. So
and it's this is something that confuses me. So if they test this, for it to be a successful test, isn't that going to cause catastrophic problems going forward? Because don't they have to shoot down a low orbiting satellite to show that it's worked? Or are they just testing its range and getting it to the height and then disabling it?
Yeah, I think this test, and China's only, I think, done it on one actual satellite, maybe two now. But yeah, they basically just launch them and say, oh, we can get it high enough, or we can get it accurate enough that we can shoot something down. Whether Russia will actually do a live test and shoot down, it'll probably be some old Russian satellite they will choose to do it on. Whether they do, I don't know. But
I tell you what, man, that scares me, because I feel like if there is a war in the future, it's probably going to go that way, because just the way that the world is with like digital communications and stuff, it's just scary. And as we've talked about in our first ever episode, it's going to cause so many problems.
Oh yeah, if there was, say, a war and a country decided to shoot down, tens of satellites, the amount of debris it would create would be absolutely huge. And I would think, if you shot down tens, maybe 100 satellites, that would probably be it for quite a while.
Yeah,
in terms of space activities.
Yeah, and just the destruction it would cause for digital communications across the world. It would be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
It's not good. But yeah, I don't know if they're doing anything else with it or anything. But I think Space Force is a funny one. I still don't know how I feel about it. Like, I get it. Like, I actually watched something about it, and they had a very good point, and they were basically saying how there are branches within the Air Force and the Navy and the Army that do have special teams operating within the space sector, but they basically wanted to unify it and have it as an operating branch, but they also want to have a cyber force as well, potentially in the future. So I get it. It makes it all a little bit more clean and stuff, but I don't know. I know a lot of people don't like the idea of militarizing space.
It's sort of, so I think my audio went then. It's sort of like the again, like the Antarctic, isn't it? We sort of think of it as it's pristine, sort of last place kind of thing. But as it becomes more commercialized, I imagine people will probably take more of an interest in security and defending it. So
they're definitely, as we were saying, there definitely needs to be oversight. It's just it's always awkward who decides who gets to be the oversight. Do you know what I mean? Because if one country decides it, all the other countries, it's not really fair on them. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's just gonna be a mess until we figure that one out.
Yeah, I don't really see it getting better anytime soon, to be honest. But
no,
fingers crossed it will come out all right.
Yeah.
So my last bit of news was tech news on Bitcoin. Hey,
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin news. Bitcoin, as of yesterday, so the 16th of December when we're recording this, has reached new highs. It's just gone past $20,000.
Insane.
Yeah, and basically, I think because of the pandemic, people are seeing it as a bit of a an investment that's a bit, so it's separated from the markets and not affected by sort of pandemic stuff, which is why people are investing in it. PayPal is going to start accepting it in certain ways from next year. So I think people are starting to get behind it again. And I guess we're just sort of waiting to see whether this is another sort of boom and bust like there was last year sort of thing, or whether it sticks around and stays high.
I really like the idea of cryptocurrencies. I feel like it really does have potential to shift the global market, especially not getting a one world currency, but it definitely has potential to make waves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The thing, my only problem with it is like I said, the reason why it's got traction is because it's separated from the economy.
Yeah.
That's why people are buying it, and that's why people are interested in it. It's this separate thing. But for it to be of use, it will eventually have to be integrated into the economy, or the economy will have to integrate into it.
Yeah.
At which point it loses a lot of its like value
Yeah.
because it's not a separate thing anymore. Obviously, the technology behind the blockchain technology means it's not controlled by a bank or financial institution. It's supposed to be a sort of an independently backed thing. But in terms of actually like its utility, I think it will be like everything else. It'll be at the moment it's got no inherent value, has it? Like there's very few ways that you can actually buy something with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Which means that it's sort of separated from the value of real world stuff.
Well, it's used quite a lot on the dark web as well, isn't it?
Yeah, that's. But like once you're able to like buy a pint of milk with it, it's then got a value because it's tied to the value of stuff that you can buy.
Yeah.
And I think my personal view on it is it will just become a bit of a online sort of currency that people use, and it will eventually settle down at some value. And I could probably see it crashing again. But have you got any Bitcoin? You in Bitcoin at all?
No, I don't have any Bitcoin. I don't have any Bitcoin. What about you?
No, I avoided it.
We should actually do an episode, on blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I think that'd be quite interesting.
I've looked into it, and I really don't understand it at all.
I understand blockchain a little bit. I've watched some stuff on it, and I think the technology of blockchain has loads of potential. Maybe not so much cryptocurrencies, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. We'll put it down as something we can look at. It probably need one I need to look at a bit more, but
yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up this week, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
I think that was a fun episode. Sorry, anybody, if we've changed your mind on what your views were on living forever or dying, or if we freaked you out, or if you can't sleep tonight.
Oh, sorry if your nan's in cryogenics as we speak.
Yeah, sorry about that. And anybody in the future watching this, if you have been thawed out and reanimated, you definitely got the last laugh. So, haha, well done, you. I'm happy for you. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give us a thumbs up on the YouTubes and go and give us a good rating on Apple Podcasts because it helps with our ranking. If you want to suggest a episode, you can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at The Infinite Void Pod. And if you want to drop us an email, it's theinfinitevoidpodcast@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon now, but there should be a trailer for that somewhere in this. I can't remember all the links because we've got too many now. So listen out for that one. And there'll also be a link in the description. And if you want to message me, I'm at Jacob E. Carson on Twitter, and Matty is at the Matty JMP. And yeah, guys, we will see you in the Infinite Void next week. Everybody have a great Christmas. Hey everyone, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about our brand new Patreon page.
Yeah, so we've devised a load of new goodies that are neatly packaged across 3 different tiers for you.
Tiers start at £3 and go all the way up to £10 a month.
Just to say, the Patreon is in no way an obligation, and we're going to continue making the podcast as it is freely available across all the platforms. But if you'd like to support us and show your support, you can now.
So yeah, head over to patreon.com/Infinite Void Pod for more information.